reasons people have invented fiscal policy, and it wasn't no one invented it. It was Keynes who, in the Depression, figured out, well, maybe we can use fiscal policy to get the economy out of the Depression. And the rationale was that for every dollar spent for G, $1 spent for G, you're going to create more spending at the C level. In fact, significantly more spending. You're going to create more spending at the state and local government level, and moreover, since you're going to have so much more consumer spending, you will have more need for plant and equipment, and you'll end up with more investment spending. The net result of this is something called, quote, the multiplier. And my guess is, if you dig deep back into your backgrounds, if you ever took a macroeconomic course, which I would presume the great majority of you have done, you remember, quote, the multiplier, and that's the multiplier. The multiplier simply means that one more dollar of government spending will create spending elsewhere so that the sum of them is a multiple of the original dollar. In fact, this is the way it works. Let's say the government, and by the way, it could not only be government spending, it could also be tax rebates, tax refunds, as we received a year ago. Basically, the idea is if the government gives us $1, we as consumers, at least in the textbook version, go out and spend about 90 cents. I.e., okay, we're in Austin, we're building a courthouse downtown, and they spend $1 million on the courthouse. 80%, 70% probably goes to labor. They get paid. Everyone gets paid. The point is, as you receive your income, the workers go out and buy lunch. And then someone else gets income, and then the restaurant entrepreneur receives income, and he buys a TV, and whoever produced the TV gets the income and produces more. So basically, you have round after round of spending response in turn once the government introduces one more dollar into the system. That's the assumption. That's the assumption that we've been teaching probably for 50 years at the University of Texas and everywhere else across the country. So basically, what they're saying is fiscal policy works with a multiple. You spend one more dollar at the government level. In fact, the size of those multipliers, and here's, quote, the multiplier, the change in GDP for a change in government spending. The textbook version, and another way to put the textbook version is, I call it the the free lunch version. The free lunch version, by the way, the typical textbook version is the multiplier, or the change in GDP from all these additional add-on spending in addition to that $1. That multiplier theoretically was 10. They're still teaching, thank you. There's one place they're not teaching it. There's at least one textbook that doesn't. But that was the textbook version. And okay, now what we then I want to refer you to the fact that we've been engaged, for example, the fiscal stimulus bill. By the way, when an economy goes into a recession, what I want to show you is what happens to fiscal stimulus. A lot of it is automatically built into the system, which is page 8. And page 8, in the upper left-hand corner, is federal government outlay growth. Well, look, we just get into this recession, which is the gray area, and the outlay growth goes from about 2% up to about 19%. Now, remember, a fiscal stimulus bill is getting spent over 2 years, and they're having trouble getting it out there and working. They're finding projects to spend it on. It's been very delayed. Half of it was going to be this year, half next year. But basically, what you're seeing here is an automatic stimulus program built into the tax structure and the spending structure. This goes back by design. This is fiscal stimulus by design that's built in, aside from fiscal stimulus plans. And this added spending in recessions, by the way, it hardly happened here. It happened far more here. And basically, that's for the government paying for unemployment insurance. Those who become unemployed, and it's a right. It requires no legislation because it's cooked into the legislation. So there's an entitlement program that kicks in and starts spending. On top of that, implicit stimulus, we can have explicit stimulus, which indeed is what we passed for what, 785 billion, I believe the number was, which amounts to, with a $14 trillion economy, it was about what, 5% or something like that, and they were to spread it over 2 years. So a lot of this is just paying for, what's already cooked into the law, fiscal stimulus. The other way you get fiscal stimulus is you go into a recession, you build the tax base of the economy based on progressive taxes. And as your income declines, you pay a lower tax rate, so that the tax proceeds go to the government. And look, they were rising at 15% in the boom, and now they're contracting at 16%. So what you end up having is an explosion of the deficit, both because spending automatically as well as given the additional bills goes up. At the same time, the tax revenues go down. Part of this, by the way, was the refunds. So what we've had then is we've had fiscal stimulus of a mega amount. We've never seen it before, actually. We're up to about an 18% increase in spending and a 15% decline in tax take. The difference then becomes the deficit. And look at the extent to which the deficit of the government has exploded. And this is numeric, and I'll get to the percentage. We've gone, by the way, we just closed the books on the last fiscal year a week or two ago, or very recently, maybe 1st of October, and it ended up being a fiscal deficit of $1.4 trillion, which ended up being 10% of GDP, which the highest peacetime, by the way, compares to about a 20% deficit in World War II, and the largest other, quote, peacetime federal deficit was about 6%. So we're almost not quite double the largest previous fiscal deficit. Now, theoretically, what's supposed to happen is all that government spending is supposed to ramp this up, and furthermore, consumption spending or consumer spending is supposed to rise because they're paying less taxes. And so we're supposed to get some big multiple and come out of this thing. The bottom line is we had fiscal expansion or stimulus of $1.4 trillion, and yet GDP fell by $1 trillion. So obviously something's not working. The textbook version is not working. And I call the textbook version, quote, the free lunch version of fiscal stimulus. It assumes that to raise government spending and in turn cause all these other categories of spending to increase and then get yourself out of the recession, it assumes that the money is raised to do the spending without any adverse effects. Basically, quote, the free lunch. And by the way, that could be true. It's true in China today. They have a fiscal stimulus bill that's way in excess of ours, but it was funded from previous savings. So there were no secondary side effects. In our case, we have lots of secondary side effects. The effect of all that is that with a $1 increase in government spending, state and local spending is highly muted. Consumption is a fraction improved from what it was, etc. Investment hardly is taking place because what? We still have an enormous excess capacity. So basically what's happened is this multiplier effect of GDP as a result of an increase in government spending. This is textbook, or the other way to put it is the free lunch, no side effects. The money came free.